Help! My employer has offered me a settlement agreement. I don't know what to do. We know it isn't a nice feeling to be told your employer doesn't want you. Rebel Law is here to help you get the best possible deal and manage your exit with dignity, so you focus on moving on. What is a settlement agreement? A settlement agreement is a legally binding contract that lays out the terms of the end of your employment. Employers use them to prevent an employee suing them, typically in exchange for payment. Why do employers offer settlement agreements? It might be hard to hear, but they don't want you to work there. A settlement agreement means you can leave with your head held high. You might have made a complaint about a colleague or your manager. Sometimes it's just to avoid the hassle and cost of completing other processes like a performance management review or redundancies, for example. Or it might not be performance related and it could be totally personal. It sucks, so don't let them shaft you in the settlement agreement. Quite often, it's a risk management situation. The employer may realise that they're at fault and they want to avoid the stress and expense of lengthy legal proceedings. Settlements typically involve the employee waiving their rights to sue their employer for things like unfair dismissal or discrimination. Essentially, they're paying you off to leave quietly. You might have been told you're going to be offered a settlement agreement if you're in a redundancy situation where the employer is going to pay more than the minimum they have to pay you in law. Maybe you've been on long-term sick leave and it's unlikely that you'll be fit to return in the foreseeable future. Do I really need a lawyer for my settlement agreement? In order for a settlement agreement to be binding in law, you have to have advice on its terms and effect from a solicitor, or a barrister or chartered legal executive, or a trade union rep or law centre worker. This is where we come in. It must be someone independent, so it cannot be the same lawyer that's advised the employer. Of course, we recommend using specialist employment lawyers. Lots of non-specialist lawyers offer to help with settlement agreements, often quite cheaply. But employment law is complex, and you don't want to get this wrong by engaging someone who spends the rest of their time on unrelated legal issues or one who isn't regulated properly. What's included in a settlement agreement? Every settlement agreement is different, and the terms are usually only agreed following some negotiation. Have we mentioned that Rebel Law are negotiation superheroes? Broadly, a typical settlement agreement will include how much money you'll get and what this figure's made up of. For example, holiday pay and your bonus, the date your employment will end, how your settlement figure will be taxed, what happens to your company car, private health coverage, pension or share scheme, your reference for your next employer, what happens to company property like your work mobile and laptop, whether you're allowed to talk about the agreement, usually not, and whether you can badmouth your employer. Spoiler alert, they will want to prevent you from doing this. And it will include the settlement of your claims. So, except for some really limited circumstances, you'll sign away your right to sue your employer as part of this agreement. And what about fees? When you're about to lose your job, money is probably one of your biggest concerns. The good news is that usually the employer contributes towards or covers these costs. Sometimes they don't offer enough to cover the full fees, so you may need to top up this contribution. Rebel Law are happy to discuss and negotiate our fees directly with your employer. If you're generally happy with the financial package being offered by your employer, and we advise that the wording of the agreement is broadly fair and reasonable, then you may wish us just to advise within the employer contribution to your legal fees. We also offer a Settlement Agreement Plus service. So if you're not happy with the compensation package, or we advise that it's unreasonably low, or we identify some hideous unfairness in the agreement wording that you want us to rectify, then we offer this extra service. It's where we carry out negotiation and representation to try and improve upon the package and wording for you, so that you end up with something fair and decent to compensate you for the loss of your job. This is a service that your employer does not pay for, because why would they pay us to argue with them? So we will agree costs with you in advance for this extra service. In most cases, we manage to resolve it all amicably, get you better compensation and a reference, and close the deal fairly swiftly. Don't forget, you might be ready to walk into a new role, but make sure you don't have any pesky post-termination restrictions in your contract that you've forgotten about. These restrictions limit what you can do when you leave. They might prevent you from working for competitors and stop you poaching employees or clients. We can help you negotiate your release from these restrictions or reduce their scope and duration. You can read more about these in the article on our website. Why choose rebel law? Well, we live and breathe employment law. We are experts in our field. No employee should have to resort to a high street conveyancing solicitor for half an hour of non-specific advice about their employment rights. Remember, employment law is complex. If you want the best service, you need a solicitor firm that specialises in employment law and knows their onions. One that will spend as long as it takes to discuss your employment situation, advise you on your legal rights, discuss the reasonableness of the financial package on offer, and go through the agreement with you in detail, pointing out areas where it could or should be improved. Our fees to advise you on the settlement agreement depend on the length and complexity of the documents and the situation, the value of the compensation, the sector you work in, and your seniority, and if there are restrictive covenants to consider. Our prices are all set out on our website. So give us a call if you want quality of service and lawyers who always do a thorough and complete job.